My name is Eileen, and I am 55 years old. For 32 years, I believed I knew everything about my husband, Raymond. He was my partner, my best friend, the man I trusted with our entire future. 3 weeks ago, he passed away suddenly from a heart attack. I thought losing him was the worst pain I would ever feel. But that Saturday afternoon, when my daughter opened his desk drawer and asked why her grandmother's necklace was inside, I realized I never truly knew him at all. Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop a comment below with your city or country. And if you have ever wondered whether the person closest to you might be hiding something, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because what I am about to share with you changed everything I thought I knew about love trust and the man I shared my life with. I met Raymond when we were both 23 years old. It was at a mutual friend's birthday party in a small restaurant downtown. He was standing by the window holding a glass of soda because he said he did not drink alcohol. I remember thinking how different he was from the other young men at that party. Quiet, thoughtful. He asked me about my dreams instead of talking about himself. By the end of that night, I knew I wanted to see him again. We dated for 2 years before getting married. Raymond worked as an accountant at a manufacturing company, and I was finishing my nursing degree. Our wedding was simple, just family and close friends in a small church. My mother, Martha, cried happy tears and told me I had found a good man. I believed her with all my heart. For 32 years, our life followed a predictable rhythm. Raymond went to work every morning at 7:30. He came home at 6. He managed all of our finances because he said that was his expertise, and I trusted him completely. I never questioned a single bank statement. I never asked to see our savings account balance. Why would I? He was an accountant. He knew what he was doing. We had one daughter, Brooke, who became the center of our universe. Raymond was a devoted father in his own way. He attended her school plays, helped her with math homework, and walked her down the aisle at her college graduation. Looking back now, I wonder which parts of those memories were real and which were performances. I worked as a nurse for 28 years at the local hospital. It was demanding work, long shifts, and difficult patients, but I loved it. 2 years ago, I retired early due to some minor health issues. Nothing serious, just my body telling me to slow down. Raymond said he wanted to work a few more years to add to our retirement savings. I thought he was being responsible. Now I know he had a very different reason for staying employed. Our life seemed comfortable. We owned our home, a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. We had 2 cars, a small savings account that Raymond said was growing steadily, and plans to travel once he retired. Italy, Alaska, maybe even a cruise to the Caribbean. Raymond would smile when I mentioned these trips and say, "Soon we will do all of that soon." 3 weeks before everything changed, Raymond came home from work looking more tired than usual. I asked if he was feeling okay. He said it was just stress from a big project at the office. He went to bed early that night. I brought him a cup of tea and kissed his forehead. That was a Thursday. The following Monday, I was in the garden planting tulip bulbs when my phone rang. It was Raymond's office. The voice on the other end was shaking. They said Raymond had collapsed at his desk during a meeting. By the time the ambulance arrived, his heart had stopped. They tried to revive him at the hospital, but it was too late. I do not remember driving to the hospital. I do not remember signing papers or talking to doctors. The next thing I truly recall is sitting in a plastic chair in a cold waiting room while someone handed me a bag containing Raymond's personal belongings. His wallet, his watch, his keys, his phone. 32 years of marriage reduced to a clear plastic bag. The funeral was exactly what Raymond would have wanted. Simple, no fuss. His colleagues came and spoke about what a reliable man he was, how he never missed a deadline, how he was always willing to help others. Friends from church talked about his quiet faith and his generous heart. Everyone said I was lucky to have had such a good husband for so long. For 3 weeks, I moved through the days like a ghost. I accepted casseroles from neighbors. I answered sympathy cards. I slept on my side of the bed, unable to bring myself to spread out into his empty space. Brooke came home for the funeral and stayed for a week, but she had to return to her job and her life with Derek, her boyfriend of 3 years. I told her I would be fine. What else could I say? Then the lawyer called. He needed certain documents to settle Raymond's estate, insurance policies, bank statements, investment records. He asked if I knew where Raymond kept his important papers. I said I would look in his study. Raymond's study was a room at the back of our house. He spent hours there every evening, door closed, doing what he called catching up on work. I rarely went inside. It was his space, his private sanctuary, and I respected that boundary. Now that he was gone, I realized I had never actually seen what was in that room. I called Brooke and asked if she could come help me go through everything. She agreed immediately. That Saturday morning, she drove 3 hours to be with me. Derek offered to come too, but Brooke said this was something she and I should do together. I was grateful for her presence. I did not want to face that room alone. When we stood outside the study door that morning, I felt something I could not explain. A heaviness in my chest, a whisper of warning that I pushed aside. This was just paperwork, I told myself. Just the sad task of sorting through a dead man's files. Nothing more. How wrong I was. The study smelled like old paper and wood polish when I opened the door. Raymond had always kept it immaculately clean, everything in its place, not a single document out of order. His massive oak desk sat in the center of the room, facing the window that looked out onto the backyard. Bookshelves lined 2 walls filled with accounting manuals, tax guides, and a few novels he never seemed to finish. A filing cabinet stood in the corner, gray metal 4 drawers deep. Brooke walked in behind me and let out a small sigh. "This feels strange," she said, "like we are intruding." I understood exactly what she meant. Even though Raymond was gone, this room still felt like his territory. But we had a job to do, so I pushed my feelings aside and suggested we divide the work. Brooke would start with the bookshelves, looking for any documents tucked between pages. I would tackle the filing cabinet. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. I found tax returns going back 20 years, neatly organized by date. I found our mortgage documents, car titles, and insurance policies. I found our marriage certificate in a protective sleeve, along with Brooke's birth certificate and her school transcripts. Raymond had kept everything labeled and filed with the precision of someone who spent his life working with numbers. Then Brooke asked about the desk. She was standing in front of it, pointing at the large bottom drawer on the right side. There was a small brass lock on it, different from the other drawers. I had never noticed it before. I told her Raymond always kept that drawer locked, and I assumed it was where he stored sensitive work documents. "Do you have the key?" Brooke asked. I remembered the bag of personal belongings from the hospital. Inside was Raymond's key ring. I went to the bedroom and retrieved it, my hands trembling slightly, though I did not understand why. When I returned to the study, I handed the keys to Brooke. She tried 3 different small keys before one slid smoothly into the lock. There was a soft click as it turned. Brooke pulled the drawer open slowly. Inside was a small wooden box with a hinged lid, a leather-bound notebook, and a stack of envelopes bound together with a rubber band. Brooke reached for the wooden box first. She lifted the lid and froze. I watched her face change. The color drained from her cheeks. Her hands began to shake. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, why is my necklace in here?" I moved closer and looked into the box. There, resting on a bed of dark velvet, was a strand of pearls. I recognized them immediately. My mother, Martha, had given that necklace to Brooke before she passed away 12 years ago. It was a family heirloom passed down through 3 generations. Brooke had treasured it more than anything she owned. And then 10 years ago, it disappeared. Brooke had been home from college for winter break. She kept the necklace in her jewelry box in her childhood bedroom. One morning she went to wear it and found the box empty. We searched everywhere. We called the police and filed a report, though nothing ever came of it. Brooke cried for days. Raymond held her and said that objects are just objects, that what mattered was keeping her grandmother's memory in her heart. Now that necklace was in his locked drawer. I reached into the box with shaking hands and found more. A pair of diamond earrings that I thought had been stolen during a vacation 8 years ago. A ruby ring that belonged to my mother, which I had lost 5 years back. A gold bracelet Raymond gave me for our 20th anniversary, which vanished from my dresser 3 years ago. Every piece of jewelry I thought I had lost or had stolen was right here, in my husband's secret drawer. Brooke looked at me, with tears streaming down her face. I could not speak. The room seemed to spin around me. Nothing made sense. Why would Raymond take these things? Why would he lock them away? Why would he let us grieve over losing them when they were right here in our house? The entire time I picked up the leather notebook hoping for answers. What I found inside would destroy everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The notebook was filled with Raymond's handwriting. I recognized the small, precise letters immediately. He always wrote the same way, careful and controlled, just like everything else about him. But the contents of that notebook were nothing like the man I knew. Page after page documented financial transactions, dates, amounts, locations. Some entries went back more than 20 years. I saw names of casinos in Atlantic City, addresses of betting shops in neighboring states, website names for online gambling platforms, and numbers. So many numbers. $500 here, $2,000 there, $8,000 on a single night. The amounts grew larger as the years progressed. What started as hundreds became thousands. What started as occasional became weekly. The most recent entry was dated just 10 days before Raymond died. $12,000 lost in a single online poker session. My husband was a gambler. For over 2 decades, he had hidden this addiction from me and from our daughter. The man who managed our finances with such apparent competence had been bleeding money into casinos and betting sites for years. Brooke took the envelopes from the drawer while I sat frozen with the notebook in my lap. She opened them one by one, and each one brought a new horror. Receipts from pawn shops. Raymond had pawned my jewelry, our family heirlooms, and used the money to gamble. Some receipts showed he had redeemed the items, buying them back after winning streaks. Others showed items that were never retrieved, sold to strangers to pay off debts. The jewelry in the box must have been pieces he managed to get back. Small victories in an endless war of losses. Then Brooke found the credit card statements. She spread them across the desk with trembling hands. There were accounts I had never seen before. Credit cards in my name that I had never applied for. Credit cards in Brooke's name that she knew nothing about. The balances were staggering. $40,000 on one card, $25,000 on another, $18,000 on a third. Mom, Brooke said, her voice cracking. I never opened these accounts. I never signed anything. I knew she was telling the truth, which meant Raymond had forged her signature. He had stolen her identity to fund his addiction. He had done the same with mine. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I could not breathe. I could not think. Everything I believed about my life, my marriage, my husband was crumbling into dust. Brooke pulled out her phone. We need to call the police, she said. I nodded slowly. Brooke dialed the number. Officer Marcus Webb arrived within 30 minutes. He was a man in his late 40s with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. He listened as Brooke and I explained what we had found, taking notes without interrupting. When we finished, he examined the evidence spread across Raymond's desk. This is serious, he said quietly. I am going to need to call in a detective who specializes in financial crimes. Detective Angela Harris arrived an hour later. She was a woman around 45 with short gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. But beneath her professional exterior, I sensed genuine compassion. She reviewed the notebook, the credit card statements, the pawn shop receipts. She asked questions about Raymond's behavior, his work schedule, his access to our financial accounts. I answered as best I could, though most of my answers were simply that I did not know. Finally, She sat down across from me and took a deep breath. "Mrs. Eileen," she said, "I am very sorry to tell you this, but based on what we are seeing here, your husband appears to have been engaged in systematic financial fraud for many years. The gambling addiction explains the motive. The forged credit accounts and pawned valuables show the methods, and I am afraid this is likely just the beginning." She explained that we would need to contact our banks immediately. We would need to check all accounts, all loans, all lines of credit associated with our names. She warned me that the total damage could be significant. I asked her what significant meant. She paused before answering. "In cases like this," she said, "we sometimes see debts in the hundreds of thousands of dollars." The room went silent. Brooke grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard. I stared at the detective, unable to process her words. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I had never suspected a thing. The next 48 hours were a blur of phone calls and revelations, each one worse than the last. I called our bank first, following Detective Harris's instructions. I asked to speak with the manager and explained the situation as clearly as I could manage. The manager, a man named Carl Henderson, pulled up our accounts and went quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Mrs. Eileen," he said, "I need to ask you some questions. Are you aware of the second mortgage taken out on your home 18 months ago?" I told him I was not. I had never signed any such document. He continued, "The signature on file matches your name, but if you are saying you did not authorize this loan, we may be looking at forgery. The second mortgage was for $75,000. The balance remaining was $68,000. He asked about our retirement accounts next. The one Raymond had told me was growing steadily over the years. Carl Henderson informed me that the account had been emptied 11 months ago. A transfer to an external account that no longer existed. 32 years of savings. Gone. By the time I hung up the phone, I had a preliminary picture of the devastation. Our savings accounts were empty. Our retirement fund was gone. Our house was mortgaged twice over. There were credit cards in my name totaling over $90,000 in debt. There were more in Brooke's name, another $40,000. The total, according to my rough calculations, was somewhere close to $300,000. $300,000 of debt accumulated through gambling and fraud by the man I had loved and trusted for more than 3 decades. Brooke had called Derek, who drove immediately to be with her. She sat in the living room with her head in her hands, sobbing quietly while he rubbed her back. I wanted to comfort her, but I could barely hold myself together. Detective Harris returned the next day with more information. Her team had been doing research into Raymond's activities. What they found painted an even darker picture. Raymond had apparently been gambling since before we were married. Small amounts at first, then larger as the addiction took hold. He was skilled at hiding it because of his profession. An accountant knows how to manipulate numbers, how to create false trails, how to make debts disappear on paper while they grew in reality. Over the years, he had received bonuses from his company that I never knew about. All of it went to gambling. He had sold stocks that we jointly owned without my knowledge. He had borrowed money from coworkers under false pretenses, claiming temporary financial difficulties that he promised to resolve quickly. Some of those coworkers had already contacted the police, wanting to know if they would ever see their money again. He had even taken out a life insurance policy 3 years ago, naming me as the beneficiary. The premium payments had come from one of the fraudulent credit cards. Detective Harris said the insurance company would likely refuse to pay out once they learned of the circumstances. That night, after everyone had left, I sat alone in the living room with all the lights off. The house was silent. The same house where I had raised my daughter, celebrated holidays, built what I thought was a happy life. I looked at our wedding photo on the mantle, 2 young people full of hope and promise. I did not recognize the man in that picture anymore. He was a stranger wearing my husband's face. The tears came then. Not the gentle tears of grief I had shed at his funeral. These were different, deeper, angrier. I cried for the money lost, yes, but more than that, I cried for the lies. 32 years of lies. Every time he said our finances were fine. Every time he told me not to worry. Every time he held our daughter while she cried over her lost necklace, knowing it was locked in his drawer just feet away. How could I have been so blind? How could I have loved someone without ever truly knowing them? The questions had no answers, only an endless aching void where my trust used to be. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the kitchen as the sun rose, watching the light slowly fill the room. My eyes were swollen from crying. My body felt hollow. But somewhere in the exhaustion and the grief, something else began to stir. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind. This was colder, harder. The kind of anger that comes when you realize you have been made a fool and you refuse to stay one any longer. Raymond had spent decades lying to me. He had stolen from me and our daughter. He had gambled away our future and left us drowning in debt. And now he was gone beyond reach, beyond accountability, leaving me to clean up his mess. I could not change what he had done, but I could choose how I responded. When Brooke came downstairs that morning, she found me sitting at the table with a notepad and a pen. I was making a list of everything that needed to be done. Banks to contact, credit agencies to notify, lawyers to consult, insurance companies to deal with. "Mom," she said, "are you okay?" I looked up at her and felt a clarity I had not experienced in weeks. "No," I said, "I am not okay, but I am not going to fall apart either. Your father left us in a terrible situation, and feeling sorry for ourselves will not fix it. We need to fight." Brooke sat down across from me. Her eyes were red from crying, but I saw something in them that mirrored what I was feeling. A determination, a refusal to be defeated. "What do we do first?" she asked. "We find a lawyer," I said. "A good one." Through Detective Harris, we got a recommendation for an attorney named Stephen Walsh, who specialized in financial fraud and bankruptcy cases. His office was in the city, a 90-minute drive away, but Brooke insisted on taking me to meet him in person. Stephen Walsh was a man in his early 60s with silver hair and a reassuring presence. He spent 2 hours reviewing our documents and asking questions. When he finally leaned back in his chair, his expression was serious but not hopeless. "Here is the situation," he said. "The bad news is that your husband committed multiple crimes, including identity theft, forgery, and fraud. The debts in his name are legitimately his, and as his surviving spouse, some of those may transfer to you depending on the specifics." I braced myself for the worst, but he continued, "The debts incurred through forged signatures are a different matter. If we can prove that you and your daughter never authorized those credit accounts, the creditors cannot legally hold you responsible. The same applies to the second mortgage if the bank accepted a forged signature without proper verification." He outlined a plan. We would file fraud reports with every credit company involved. We would work with the bank to challenge the second mortgage. We would document everything and build a case proving that Eileen and Brooke were victims, not participants. "It will not be quick," he warned. "These things take months, sometimes years. But I believe we can significantly reduce your liability." For the first time since opening that drawer, I felt a small spark of hope. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into the process. I made phone calls. I gathered documents. I wrote letters and filled out forms. Every time a creditor tried to pressure me into paying a debt I had not authorized, I stood my ground and referred them to my lawyer. It was exhausting work. There were days when I wanted to give up, to simply let the tide of debt wash over me. But then I would think about Brooke. I would think about the grandchildren I might have someday. I would think about all the years I had ahead of me and the life I still wanted to live. I was not going to let Raymond's choices destroy me. Some of his former coworkers contacted me asking about the money he had borrowed. A few were angry and demanding. I listened to them calmly and explained that I had not known about the loans and had no legal obligation to repay them. Most of them eventually accepted this. One or two threatened legal action, but nothing ever came of it. I also began selling things. Raymond's car went first, then the expensive watch his company had given him for 20 years of service. Then various items around the house that I realized had probably been purchased with borrowed money anyway. Each sale was a small act of reclamation, a way of converting lies back into truth. The house grew emptier, but it felt lighter somehow, like shedding weight I had not known I was carrying. 2 months after Raymond's death, I walked into his former study, now bare of everything except a reading chair I had brought in from the living room. The oak desk was gone, sold to an antique dealer. The filing cabinet had been emptied and donated. The shelves held my own books, now novels I had always wanted to read but never had time for. I sat in that chair and looked out the window at the garden. The tulip bulbs I had planted the day Raymond died were starting to push green shoots through the soil. Life continued. Whether I was ready for it or not, rebuilding my life meant rebuilding my relationships too, and the most important one was with my daughter. Brooke had taken the revelations about her father hard. Beyond the financial betrayal, there was the deeper wound of knowing he had stolen from her specifically. The necklace from her grandmother, the credit cards in her name, the lies he told while looking her in the eye. But crisis has a way of either breaking relationships or forging them stronger. For Brooke and me, it was the latter. She decided to move back home temporarily, both to help me navigate the legal battles and because she needed her mother. Derek supported the decision completely. He visited on weekends and helped with practical tasks like sorting through paperwork and making repairs around the house. During those weeks of living together, Brooke and I talked more honestly than we ever had. We sat up late at night sharing memories of Raymond trying to separate the real from the false. We admitted things we had noticed over the years, but dismissed as unimportant. The times he seemed stressed about money despite claiming everything was fine. The way he would disappear into his study for hours. The trips he took alone that he called work conferences. I always felt like something was off. Brooke confessed one night. But I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe he was the father I thought he was. I understood completely. I had done the same thing for 32 years. We made a pact that night. In our family going forward, truth would be the foundation. No more secrets, no more polite silences about things that mattered. If something felt wrong, we would say so. If we needed help, we would ask for it. My friendship with Gloria deepened during this time as well. She had been my closest friend since our days working together as nurses, and she showed up for me in ways I would never forget. She brought meals when I forgot to eat. She listened when I needed to talk and sat in comfortable silence when I had no words left. She held my hand during the worst moments and celebrated the small victories with me. One day, she mentioned a support group she had heard about. It was for people whose lives had been affected by a loved one's gambling addiction. At first, I resisted the idea. Going to a support group felt like admitting I was a victim, and I was tired of feeling that way. But Gloria gently persisted, and eventually I agreed to attend one meeting. Walking into that community center room was one of the hardest things I have ever done. There were about 15 people seated in a circle, mostly women ranging in age from their 30s to their 70s. They looked at me with understanding eyes, not pity, and welcomed me without judgment. As I listened to their stories, I realized I was not alone. There was a woman whose son had stolen her retirement savings, a man whose wife had secretly mortgaged their home 3 times, a grandmother raising her grandchildren because her daughter's gambling had led to losing custody. Each story was different, but the themes were the same. Betrayal by someone they loved. Blindness they blamed themselves for. The long, painful process of rebuilding. A woman named Margaret, who was about 60 years old, became something of a mentor to me. Her husband had died 10 years earlier with similar debts, and she had walked the same path I was now on. She shared practical advice and emotional wisdom in equal measure. "You will get through this," she told me after one meeting. "It does not feel like it now, but one day you will look back and realize how strong you became." I held on to those words during the darkest moments. Somewhere in the middle of all this rebuilding, I rediscovered something I had lost years ago: my love of painting. While cleaning out a closet, I found a box of old canvases from my 20s. Before nursing, before marriage, before motherhood, I had dreamed of being an artist. I had taken classes, filled sketchbooks, spent weekends in parks capturing landscapes in watercolor. Then life happened. Raymond happened. I put away my brushes and picked up responsibilities instead. He never encouraged me to continue. Now I wondered if that was deliberate, one more way of keeping me dependent on him. I bought new supplies. Acrylic paints because they dried faster than oils. A small easel that fit by the window in my newly reclaimed study. And I began to create again. The first paintings were dark. Stormy skies and bare trees and figures walking alone on empty roads. The art therapist at the support group said this was normal, a way of processing grief and anger through color and form. But gradually the palette shifted. Blues and purples gave way to yellows and greens. The lonely figures found companions. The storms cleared into sunrises. I signed up for a painting class at the community center. There I met other people who painted for joy, for healing, for the simple pleasure of making something beautiful. We became friends, this small group of amateur artists. We had coffee after class and visited galleries together. They knew nothing about Raymond, or the debts, or the betrayal. To them, I was just Eileen, the woman who painted landscapes with unexpected passion. It felt good to be someone new. Spring arrived 6 months after Raymond's death, bringing with it green shoots in the garden and cautious optimism in my heart. The legal battles were far from over, but we were making progress. Attorney Stephen Walsh had successfully challenged several of the fraudulent credit accounts. The companies had reviewed the evidence and agreed that the signatures were forged. One by one, those debts were being erased from my record and from Brooks. The second mortgage was more complicated because it involved the bank's failure to properly verify consent. Stephen was building a case arguing that they had been negligent in accepting a forged signature. He believed we had a strong chance of having the loan invalidated or at least significantly reduced. The total debt had dropped from $300,000 to just under $100,000. Still a staggering amount, but no longer insurmountable. I would have to make adjustments. The retirement I had imagined with travel and leisure and comfort was not going to happen the way I planned. But I could keep my house. I could live modestly but securely. I could have a future. My relationship with Brooke continued to flourish. She had moved back to her own apartment with Derek, but she visited every week without fail. Sometimes we cooked together in the kitchen, where she had learned to make her first scrambled eggs. Sometimes we sat on the porch and watched the sunset without saying anything at all. One afternoon she arrived with news that made my heart swell. She and Derek were engaged. He had proposed the week before, a simple, sincere moment that she described with glowing happiness. I hugged her tightly, tears of joy streaming down my face. After everything we had been through, this felt like a promise. A sign that life could still be beautiful despite its betrayals. She asked if she could wear her grandmother's pearl necklace at the wedding. I went to my jewelry box, where I now kept all the pieces that had been recovered from Raymond's drawer. I placed the necklace in Brooke's hands and watched her clasp it around her neck. "It is finally where it belongs," I said. She hugged me again, and we stayed that way for a long time. Gloria remained a constant presence in my life. We had lunch together every Thursday, a tradition we started during the hardest months and kept even after things improved. She was the one person with whom I could be completely honest, sharing my moments of lingering anger, my occasional waves of grief, my tentative hopes for the future. The support group continued to meet, and I continued to attend. Not because I needed it as desperately as before, but because I wanted to be there for others who were just beginning their journey. I became a mentor the way Margaret had been for me, offering a listening ear and the reassurance that survival was possible. Pastor David from our church also became an important part of my support system. He never judged Raymond or asked me to forgive before I was ready. He simply reminded me that healing takes time and that grace is available even in the darkest valleys. One Sunday after service, he said something that stayed with me. He said that sometimes the hardest prisons to escape are the ones built by people we love, and that walking free does not mean forgetting what happened, but refusing to let it define what comes next. I was walking free step by step, day by day. The garden that spring was the most beautiful it had ever been. Tulips and daffodils in every color, roses beginning to bud, herbs in the small patch by the kitchen door. I spent hours out there, hands in the dirt, feeling the sun on my face. Brooke and Derek came for Sunday dinner one evening. Gloria joined us, and we crowded around my small dining table, laughing and passing dishes like a real family. Because we were one, not the family I had expected built on the foundation of a solid marriage, but a family nonetheless built on honesty and resilience and love that had survived the worst. When I looked around that table, I did not feel the weight of Raymond's absence. I felt the presence of everyone who had chosen to stay. A full year passed from the day I found that locked drawer. I marked the anniversary not with sadness, but with reflection. I sat in my study, the room that had once been Raymond's sanctuary of secrets, and wrote in my journal. I had started keeping one at the suggestion of my therapist, a woman I began seeing a few months after everything fell apart. Writing helped me process, helped me make sense of the senseless. I thought about all that had changed in 12 months. The debts were now manageable. The legal battles were mostly resolved. The house was still mine, though it would take years to pay off what remained of the legitimate mortgage. I had taken a part-time job at a local art supply store, not because I desperately needed the money, but because I enjoyed being around creative people and having somewhere to go each day. I thought about Raymond, not with the raw anger of the early months, not with the devastation of those first discoveries. The feelings had mellowed into something more complex. Sorrow for the man he might have been, pity for the addiction that consumed him, and a quiet, firm resolution to never let his choices define my worth. I did not forgive what he did. I am not sure I ever will. What he did was wrong, harmful, and selfish beyond measure. He stole from us. He lied to us. He endangered our futures to feed his compulsion. But I released my anger not for his sake, but for mine. Carrying rage is exhausting. It occupies space in your heart that could hold better things. So I chose to let it go, not in one dramatic moment, but gradually, like water evaporating on a warm day. One morning, I simply realized it was mostly gone. The woman I had become was someone I never expected to be. Stronger, more independent, more aware of my own needs and boundaries. For 32 years, I had been Raymond's wife, defined largely by my relationship to him. Now I was simply Eileen, a mother, a grandmother soon if Brooke and Derek's plans worked out, an artist, a friend, a survivor. A few weeks after the anniversary, Brooke called with news. She was pregnant. Derek was over the moon. The wedding would be moved up to accommodate her growing belly, and she hoped I would help with the planning. I cried when she told me. Happy tears, pure and uncomplicated. I thought about what my grandchild would know of Raymond. I would not lie to protect his memory, but I would not burden a child with adult complexities either. I decided I would tell the truth in age-appropriate ways when the time came. That their grandfather made mistakes that hurt people, that he struggled with something he could not control, that the people he hurt chose to move forward and build good lives anyway, because that was the real story, not Raymond's secrets, but our survival. The wedding took place on a perfect autumn day, almost exactly 13 months after Raymond's death. Brooke wore a simple white dress that did not try to hide her small bump. Around her neck hung the pearl necklace that had finally come home. Derek looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and I knew he would spend his life proving that to her. I walked her halfway down the aisle before handing her to Derek's father for the final steps, a modern compromise we had all agreed on. As I took my seat in the front row, I felt something I had not expected. Gratitude. Gratitude for Brooke, for Derek, for Gloria and Margaret and Pastor David and everyone who had helped me climb out of the wreckage. Gratitude even for the pain, because it had stripped away everything false and left only what was real. When the minister pronounced them married, I applauded with everyone else. But silently in my heart, I was celebrating something more. The end of a chapter, the beginning of something new. As I stood in that garden afterward, watching my daughter dance with her new husband, a friend from my painting class approached me. She asked how I was doing, really doing. I thought for a moment before answering. I am good, I said. It took me a long time to get here, but I am good. And I meant it. If you are listening to this story and you have ever discovered a secret that shattered your world, I want you to know something. The discovery is not the end. It feels like it in that moment. It feels like nothing could ever be okay again. But it can be. You can be. You are not responsible for the lies other people tell. You are not foolish for trusting someone you loved. The shame belongs to them, not to you. What you are responsible for is what happens next, how you respond, whether you let the betrayal bury you or whether you dig your way out and build something new. I chose to build. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, and it was worth every painful step. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever discovered something about someone close to you that completely changed how you saw them? How did you handle it? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sharing helps us all feel less alone. If this story touched you in any way, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already, so you can be part of our community. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I wish you courage for whatever battles you are facing. I wish you honesty in all your relationships. And I wish you the strength to know that no secret, no matter how devastating, has the power to destroy you unless you let it. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Until next time.